Hey everyone. I hope you're all having a really good week. This week I decided to do my safety assignment. The topic of safety definitely comes up like a lot at my placement. Working in a maximum security jail definitely requires everyone to be alert and able to respond quickly if something goes sideways, which could happen multiple times in your shift, or it couldn't happen at all. So it's really important to definitely be responsive and alert, to be able to make quick decisions and manage situations to the best of our abilities. Um, Sometimes it can be super obvious if an inmate's continuing to escalate, and in these moments, it seems to be easier to manage their behavior just because you have time to prepare. I also find working at a small institution gives us a better handle on these situations because we get to know our inmates better, we get to build rapport with them. So sometimes a certain staff could jump in and it could completely like change the inmates' behavior because they have good rapport with them. So I really like that aspect of my job. Um, I find the most difficult inmates to deal with are the ones that have really deteriorated mental health, just because you never know how they're going to react in a certain situation. They could be totally fine the day before doing the same thing, going to the shower, whatever it is, and then the next day you're taking them to the shower and they're trying to assault somebody or assault staff. So um, those situations can be pretty dangerous and tricky. Um, but luckily, as a correctional officer, we do have some options on our belt, such as OC spray or more commonly pepper spray, um, and then our handcuffs. So these can definitely help us in those situations. The OC spray is definitely getting used a lot more just because it's an effective way to disorient an inmate, and it's organic, so it's not going to really leave any long-term um, like physical or mental concerns. It definitely stings and hurts a lot at first, but it eventually wears off. So that's usually a good option to use, and it usually prevents staff from getting assaulted, inmates getting hurt, or excessive use of force being happening, um, and just allowing for everyone to get out of the use of force safer. So I do like that option that we have. Unfortunately, as a social worker and as a placement student, we don't get those options when we are working in the institution. Um, when Shannon and I do our tours in the jail, we we walk in the guard walk, so you don't actually you're between a wall, basically a grill wall. So we're able to talk to the inmates that way, and do it safely and discuss their wants and needs. Um, I've asked Shannon about the interviews she has to do for inmates, um, that involve the psychiatrist when they're trying to figure out whether they're fit to stand trial. Um, these are kind of concerning for me because she has to sit in the program room at the jail with the inmate, and it's just the two of them. Um, which again, like I said earlier, like with their usually deteriorated mental health, inmates, and that can be concerning, especially if they're getting asked questions that they don't want to hear or things like that. They could act not the way that it's expected, and if Shannon's the only one in there, they might be wanting to turn on her to make, I don't know, to react. So um, yeah, I just kind of thought this was sort of an unsafe situation, I guess, at work for her. Um, so I decided to kind of like compare my safety assignment to the Little Warriors video I did. And just to recap on that, Little Warriors is a course you can take online. It educates us on the warning signs that a child may be experiencing sexual abuse. And unfortunately, many inmates we have now have experienced childhood sexual and physical abuse, which has led them to usually addiction, incarceration, and then eventually a deteriorated mental health. I also watched a video that I made notes on and studied called NCR, or Not Criminally Responsible. This video discusses how Ontario manages manages inmates that receive the not criminally responsible during their trial. So in this video, the man that's being interviewed said something was telling him in his head that he had to kill the prettiest girl um, he saw. So this woman was leaving her place of work and he stabbed her multiple times. Um, she did survive, luckily. But yeah, he went to a mental health facility in Ontario for 8 years and then was let out into the community. Um, he was also found not criminally responsible, obviously, because he had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. Um, so Shannon and I kind of discussed like the good and the bad of these kind of situations, because like it's great that for the inmate or the patient, I guess at that point, they progress, and these hospitals are obviously pretty difficult. Like you can't just go in and do 8 years and leave. Like you have to show that you're progressing and you're making changes and you'll be a contributing member to society. So that's good too. We don't have somebody just sitting in a jail cell like clogging the system and rotting away when they could actually be getting the help that they need. Um, but then we also looked at the other side, like some people might argue, where's the justice for the victim? Like she's going to be living with psychological and physical like damage for the rest of her life. And I know she was diagnosed. She was interviewed as well, and she said like she's the biggest thing she was scared of is like, is he when he got out, is he going to come back here and find me, and like what's going to happen then? So I'm sure she's also dealing with like extreme fear in her own home, which nobody wants to feel that way. So um, that was kind of like what we discussed. Um, but I kind of just asked her too, like, how does she feel like being in a room by herself with the inmates when they're being assessed for their mental stability? And she just told me that she tries to feel out the inmate and or the situation and how the inmate has been for the last few days. If the inmate's really been deteriorating, so like staff assault or like we've had it before where they've been spreading their feces all over, she might suggest having an officer just sit on the outside of the program room while she does her assessment with him. Um, her other option, she said, is if it's not like a time sensitive assessment, she might just tell the psychiatrist, like, we'll try a different day or we'll set this up for a different time, and she'll explain why, things like that. And then the other option, she said, which is kind of a last resort, but if it's like time sensitive, they can't change the date, and we're short staffed, like a CO can't sit with her, then she'll just sit on the outside of the bars while the inmate's in the room alone doing their assessment. Um, so yeah, we kind of just talked about like how we could maybe make that situation better. Um, she said she's never really had an issue, so she's never really thought about like needing to change that, but it's like one situation will happen where they'll have to because someone will get seriously hurt. But I think we kind of talked about providing like having a correctional officer sit outside the room for it no matter what if they can. But yeah, so that was kind of what we discussed this week about safety and just kind of just looking over like what we actually do and ways that we could potentially change things.